everyone, and welcome to the Dancing Bear Enlightenment Academy podcast. I'm Dr. Beverly, your host, and today we have a very special guest, Cheri Merz. She is an author and a coach, and the name of her talk today is Your Surprising Spiritual Superpower. She is a 20-year serial entrepreneur. She has returned to her dream of a writing career after retirement. So this is her post-daily work job now. Today, more than 30 self-published novels, one memoir, and a couple of nonfiction books about writing are writing behind her. So that's a lot of books she's written. Cheri's mission is to guide entrepreneurs to write the right book to attract their ideal audience. How awesome. Welcome, Cheri.
Thank you, Dr. Beverly. I appreciate you having me on.
Well, we're very glad to have you here. So tell us now about your personal journey, about how you got started and why you decided to do this after retirement, and why is this your passion?
It's always been my passion. Words have always been my passion. As a child, I got my first grown-up novel when I was 8 years old, and I have been reading avidly ever since. And by the time I was 13 or 14, I just knew that I would be an author, a fiction author, for my career. But I got a wake-up call when I was 15. Life kind of slapped me in the face, provided me with what a lot of writers know about, which is imposter syndrome. And unfortunately, I let that stop me for 5 decades. But after retirement, I had the necessity of still contributing to the household income, and the internet had come about. And I found through an online, you might recognize this term, a gig opportunity. I found the opportunity to edit some work by a person who had a few books. They were lay books on medical types of things. His first language was not English, and he asked me to edit them. And before long, I was writing them for him. And then about a year into our collaboration, he said, well, let's write fiction. And the rest of the story is just 7 years old now. So that's how I got started in my fiction career.
Wow.
I went back to nonfiction when I decided to put what I had learned from fiction into helping other people get their writing careers started, because what I teach is the business aspects of writing rather than the craft. So it actually applies to both fiction and nonfiction.
And it's a much needed skill today. So how has this impacted you personally?
Well, I'm not a soap opera and bonbons kind of gal. I don't know what I would be doing with my life now that I'm well past the hooray, I don't have to go to work anymore retirement phase, if I didn't have this business and my writing career. So I do have both sides. I'm still writing fiction, or I should say I'm again writing fiction. And I have the coaching and courses side that, well, together they keep me really busy. And again, I don't know what I would do otherwise, you know.
I don't think anybody can really retire. You have to have something to do, otherwise you're going to watch TV, and that's not a life.
Yeah, that won't give you a very long life either.
Yeah, that's
People
true
who
too.
sit down and watch TV have health problems. But in addition to all of that, our retirement savings were embezzled by
Oh,
someone who was supposed to be taking care of them. So life on Social Security isn't great either. We're fortunate enough that we wouldn't starve or be homeless if I didn't have the income from my businesses, but it provides for a little quality of life that we wouldn't otherwise have.
yeah, of course. Wonderful. So, what is important for holistic healers and spiritual people to know about publishing? Why is it important for my audience?
So, virtually everyone I've met in the solopreneur type of business hates marketing.
Absolutely.
And it may seem kind of circular because you still have to market a book, but a book is one way to provide a second or third or fourth stream of income. It's a way to spread your message into far corners of the earth that you would not have otherwise been able to reach. And I always say writing a book is an act of courage. So I'm sure you're aware, as are most people who have been in business for more than a month or two, that there's a lot of self-development work to do with regard to keeping a business running, making it the best it can be, finding what you're great at, and how you can truly help people with your coaching or your healing modalities. That self-development comes into writing a book. So it's important for many reasons, among which there are, I think I saw today a headline that said there are 13 independent streams of income from a book. Oh. So if you're a believer 13? Like me in multiple streams of income, then a book is in your future.
13?
Yes, I wish he had elaborated, but I can't rattle off 13 off the top of my head. But for example, if you want a speaking career and you're looking for on-stage speaking gigs, all other things being equal, if you have a book and another candidate does not, you get the gig because it enhances what the gig promoter is trying to accomplish. So that's one or two actually streams of income. One is selling the book at the back of the room, and the other is the honorarium for speaking. So right there are two streams of income from having the book that have nothing to do with royalties from wide distribution, which is another stream of income, from people finding out about you and wanting to work with you, which is yet another. Those are the big ones. In fact, the royalties from your book, no matter how you publish, whether traditionally or independently, are not the mainstream of income from most people.
Yeah, that's true. But that's a good segue into why would you self-publish versus traditional publishing?
Well, I'm going to get on my soapbox now.
Okay.
So let's start with traditional publishing. To be traditionally published these days, you have to have an audience already. You have to find an agent for most publishing deals. Sometimes you can go in unagented, but that requires some knowledge about how to pitch and how to create a synopsis. Once you find an agent, they have to sell your book to a publisher. You get an advance and you lose all control over your book. You don't make any more money besides what you have to share with your agent until your book sells enough copies to pay the publisher back for that advance. That's if they give you one in the first place. If you don't sell enough, they won't do another print run. They won't market your backlist. In fact, they won't market you at all. You're still going to be responsible for marketing your book, unless you're Stephen King or J.K. Rowling, in which case you don't need marketing because you're Stephen King or J.K. Rowling or Jack Canfield to
or
give
Jean
us
Le Carré or
exactly. Anything Jack Canfield's name on now is going to sell without any further marketing. But as a solopreneur, you don't have that. More often than not, you don't have that cachet. So that's traditional publishing. And as a final kicker, it's now taking 2 to 6 years to get your book on the market with a traditional publisher.
Years?
Years.
Wow.
As fast as this world is advancing,
yeah,
we can't even afford 2 years, much
No.
less 6. By the time 6 years passes, your message has changed or become irrelevant, or some independent publisher has already talked about it.
Yeah.
Which is okay. So let's compare that to indie publishing, otherwise known as self-publishing. You have total control. The downside of that is you have total responsibility, but that's okay. And you can, as fast as you can write your book, and I urge you, as fast as you can then have it edited, get a professional cover designer to cover it with a beautiful cover, etc. All the production work that a traditional publisher takes 2 to 6 years to do, you can do in a matter of weeks. I regularly see courses that say publish your book in 90 days or less. I would say or less. So that's indie publishing. Now, how does it shake out income-wise? You make about the same amount per book either way. The great thing about traditional publishing is they have more reach than you do. On the other hand, depending on your publisher, you might end up with a garage full of books without covers, because if they don't sell and the retailers send them back to the publisher, they're not going to warehouse them. They're going to make you take them back.
Oh.
And because they're returns, the retailers are required to rip the covers off.
Oh.
So it's...
I didn't know that.
To me, that is an ecological disaster.
Yeah.
Is that my phone ringing?
I have mine muted.
It is. If you can't hear it, we will ignore it.
I can't hear it.
Good. So the great thing about indie publishing, if you publish through a distributor like Amazon or Kobo or Nook, they only print your book as it's ordered, or at most, 5 copies ahead. So you don't end up with a bunch of returns. There are places to print your book that have even higher quality, where you might end up with returns, but you're still not going to get a garage full. You might get 25 at most. Furthermore, where was I?
We're talking about when you self-publish and returns.
Yeah. So we're talking about paperbacks.
Yeah.
You don't have any control with a traditional publisher to put them on sale. You have no control over whether they create an ebook, which is rapidly overtaking print book for reader preference. You have no control whatsoever, whereas as an indie, you have all the control. And that is a mixed blessing, because it takes a while to learn all the tricks of the trade, which is where I come in.
Wow, that's quite a bit. So you can go to Amazon then and just publish through them?
Yes, it's called Kindle Direct Publishing.
Oh, Kindle. Oh, okay.
And if you're at all tech savvy, it's not a difficult thing to do.
Wow.
newbies tend to publish unedited books with homemade covers and see their books disappear into a black hole of millions of books on Amazon, which is where the tricks of the trade come in. So I think I mentioned to you once before that indie publishing is not a solo sport. And I want to make it really clear that if you don't think of yourself as a writer, it does not keep you from publishing a great book. There are many, many, many ways to get your book published as self-published. And there's a whole team of people to help you make it a really good book, to make it stand out in the catalog. There are ways to give it extra oomph with your launch. And it's not something to fear, although many people do.
Well, when I first published my book back in 1999, I created my own cover. I printed it myself. I bound it myself. And wow, that was tedious. But I actually sold quite a few because I traveled around the country and did readings and things, and people would buy my book. When I
That was the state of self-publishing in 1999.
Oh, was it?
We didn't have an Amazon in 1999.
Well, that's true. Yeah.
We had what were called vanity publishers who would charge you thousands of dollars and promise to get your book into bookstores, and they would force you to buy hundreds of copies of your books. So the state of self-publishing has changed remarkably since then. And most of us have love-hate relationships with Amazon. But one of the love parts is they led the way and still have most of the market for getting high quality books to your ideal audience. And it has been a great boon to people like you and me who can get our books published and beautifully covered and out to a wider audience than we ever would have dreamed. Certainly a wider audience than you would have encountered driving around the country selling them at your readings.
Well, actually, I was flying around the country.
Okay, flying around the country with excess baggage.
But yeah, when I republished it in 2019, I used Balboa Press.
Okay.
But I probably would not do that again either because I ended up paying them thousands of dollars, and they kept rushing me. But the biggest thing I learned, and this is my next question, is they were supposed to edit it, but they didn't. I guess there's different kinds of editors. So talk about editors and what we need for that, because that really messed me up.
I will do that. But first, I'm going to commiserate you for getting in the clutches of what we used to call a vanity press. They promise you the world and do very little.
Yeah.
And it's hard now to distinguish them from self-publishing services companies who do provide editing services, cover, etc. And some of them do it on what's the word when you don't buy a whole dinner at the same time? You pick and choose.
A la carte?
A la carte. Some of them do it a la carte. Some of them have bundles. Some of them do both. So don't necessarily think that just because you want to save yourself some time by getting a professional to handle everything all at once, that it's necessarily a bad thing. I can tell you how to tell the difference quite succinctly.
Oh, okay.
If they come to you and say, we saw your book on Amazon and we would like to publish it for you, and we'll do this, that, and the other thing, and they reference your by name and your book by name, they're more than likely a vanity press. Publishing services companies advertise like everybody else. They don't target you specifically. So If you get an email, delete it and run. So back to your question, editors. I used to say that there are three kinds of editors, and I did not include proofreaders as one of those kinds. I now do. So let me give you the step-by-step process of editing that most traditional publishers will go through. First, there's a story or a developmental editor, or sometimes it's called a content editor. This kind of editor assists you in bringing your idea to a commercially viable product. They look at what you've written, and they suggest changes, they suggest additions, they suggest what to take out, and they're actually a co-creator of your book with you. Not everyone wants or needs a developmental editor, but that's one kind. Next comes your copy editor. Once you have the final draft of your book done as professionally as you can, with making sure you have no grammar errors that you can see, you turn it over to a copy editor, and they will find hundreds of errors that you can then fix or not fix. It's up to you. Sometimes that comes in the same pass as a line editor. Line editors polish your verbiage. They make things sound more elegant. They offer different words. They make sure you don't repeat the same word or phrase over and over again unless there's a reason for doing so. They make your book more readable. Once you have all of those suggestions dealt with, we come to the proofreader. The proofreader is a set of eyes on your grammar, your punctuation, your spelling, typos, etc. All of the editors that came before that might have suggestions. The proofreader is there to pick up what other editors didn't. Finally, now, those last three might go through several iterations of your book if you're with a traditional publisher. You get to say how many iterations you do. All of these things cost money, and it might add up. So you might want to stop with one copy edit and one line edit and one proofread. That's up to you. There's an optional oops editor who goes back through and finds the oops that the proofreader didn't. They often charge by how many errors they find. So that you want to make sure that you have a good, competent copy line editor and proofreader. And I prefer that there are at least two sets of eyes in that group, because just like an author becomes blind to their own mistakes, an editor who goes through the same book multiple times will become blind to the mistakes. So that's what an oops editor is for. They're there to clean up the last little bit. And something I've recently become aware of, a new kind of editor, because the world has become so politically correct and sensitive, is a sensitivity editor.
Wow.
Some of us have unconscious biases that very sensitive readers pick up on and give you bad reviews for. So you might want a sensitivity editor to go through and make sure that you haven't inadvertently shown a bias that you did not mean to even have, much less show. So none of us wants to offend anyone.
No.
And a sensitivity editor will hopefully help prevent that.
And
So,
even sometimes words that you have a meaning for, someone else has a different meaning and it offends them, and you don't even know the possibility, and that's not what you were thinking.
yeah, phrases catch me up all the time. I was raised in the South,
Mm,
and phrases that I had no awareness of being racist are. So, I have to really be careful about that, because I don't wish to be a racist. I'm certain I have unconscious biases. Most of us who were raised in the 1950s in the South would come by them naturally, but we don't want them. And it might take someone else's eyes to point them out to us.
point them out. Yeah. Wow. So, what else can you share with us then about self publishing? You're just a host of information here. I wish I'd met you sooner.
Oh, well, so I mentioned the tricks of the trade, and one of them we've just covered exhaustively. To have your book get good ratings and good reviews, it needs to be produced as professionally as possible.
Mm-hmm.
And there are professionals to help you do that. You don't have to do it all by yourself. There are things you can do yourself that you might later want to outsource. One of those is designing the interior of your book. There are some great tools for that.
Mm.
One of them is called Vellum, Vellum. That's for a Mac. They don't make a PC version. It makes beautifully presented book interiors. And it isn't difficult to find someone who has done it for themselves often enough that they offer the service very inexpensively. There are several that are setting themselves up to be competitors with Vellum, one of which is Atticus, which is a Kindlepreneur program. I purchased it. It's an inexpensive lifetime license. Right now, I couldn't recommend it for nonfiction. There are too many missing features. I'm sure they'll be put in them later. And I love Dave Chesson, who has produced that and some other things that I use. I'm an affiliate for him for some of his things. So I'm really excited to see what Atticus becomes. Kindle Direct Publishing has something called Kindle Create. Used to be called Create Space, and it was a print book publishing service. They pulled Create Space back into the Kindle world, and then later created an online free app to interior design your books. And that's what I'm using right now, since I don't have a Mac. But that is one thing you can do and have a pretty good outcome without being a professional designer. One thing you can't do, unless you have a graphics design background, is create your own book cover. That's my story, and I'm sticking to it. I've done it. I happen to think I've done a better job than some, but it still looks like an amateur because I don't have a graphics background. There are some really remarkable designers on Fiverr.com that are quite inexpensive. I won't even tell you what I paid for my last book cover, which is absolutely gorgeous. I wish I had the book in my hands, but it was published so recently that I don't have my copy yet. But you can find it on Facebook if you go to my profile.
Yeah, I design websites and I hire graphic artists to do my major, or I go and I just buy the image.
There you go.
Because
And
it's a specialty. It's a special gift to be able to do that.
it is a specialty, and I'm glad you mentioned that about image, because you must be careful. that the person you hire, even on Fiverr, even someone who is set up to do this professionally, you must be certain where they're getting their images and make sure that they're getting licensed images.
Yeah.
Especially for book covers. There are different types of licenses for different types of for the same image.
Yeah, I found that out.
Yeah, and when you put it on a book, I think it's something like 5,000 or maybe it's 50,000 copies. And after that, you're going to have to pay for a better license. So if you're fortunate enough to sell that many books, then you need to upgrade your license. On the other hand, if you're fortunate enough to sell that many books, you can probably afford to.
Well, my book is full color even on the inside, and
Ooh.
I have a lot of images, which is why I wanted it in color. Because when I teach, it was a workbook for my classes, I would hold things up. Here's this, here's that. Well, then I took pictures of them, and in some cases, I created artwork, and I got some free clip art off of the internet and modified it. And they said you cannot use that in a book. It's free off of the internet and you can use it on websites, but you can't put it in a book.
Right.
And then I had a Tonka that I have in my wall, and they said, you can't put that in your book. I said, why not? And they said, well, you pulled that off the internet. I said, no, I took the photograph. The Tonka hangs on my wall. And they said, okay, then we can put it in your book.
But you need to properly attribute it.
Yes, I did.
So that you don't get a cease and desist order at best.
Yeah.
And a lawsuit for intellectual property infringement at worst. So all of these things they're things that ordinary people don't think about, which is why a coach or a publishing services company, someone who is expert in what's being done, is an important thing for at least for your first book, if not your first several. It took me many, many books to understand all of the nuances.
Mm-hmm.
And I didn't myself publish all 30 of those books. I was a ghostwriter for more than 20 of them. I've self-published about 10 books, including novellas. But it's also a constant moving target. Amazon in particular has a terms of services document that you would have to be very patient to read through. I only recently learned that it's against their terms of services to have someone use your account to upload your book.
Really?
Really.
Why would they care who uploaded it?
Because when you create your KDP, Kindle Direct Publishing account, you legally agree with a binding agreement not to let anyone else use your account.
Oh, okay.
So that's a nuance that a lot of people don't know. They've got their VAs uploading their books, and some people believe it's a reasonable risk. I don't, because if it's discovered that you're doing that, they can take your account away.
Yeah.
They can shut down your entire account. And you don't want that to happen.
No.
It's heartbreaking. It's kind of like having Facebook shut down your account because you have created a pen name profile. That's against Facebook's terms of service. You're supposed to use your real name. And if you don't, and if they discover it, they'll shut you down. They don't care how many followers you have on Facebook, they'll shut you down. And there goes your business. So it pays to understand the ins and outs. And having said that, I don't want to frighten anybody, because there's help for that. You don't have to know it all yourself. You just have to work with someone who does know it. And whether that's me or someone else. And I really, I can't possibly serve all of the would-be authors out there. And not everyone would be my ideal client. So that's why I collaborate with many other book coaches so that I can, if I'm not the person for you, then I know someone who might be.
Oh, that's good. Yeah, because there's so many different kinds of books.
Different kinds of books, different personalities, different ways of thinking. You know, it's until I kicked competition to the curb and learned to collaborate, I didn't have this mindset. But some of my best friends now are people who 20 years ago I would have thought of as competitors. And I'm happy to promote them. I'm happy to send business their way. None of us can serve all of the clients, not even all of the clients in the US. It's been noted that about 70% to 85% of people in the US alone think they have a book in them and think they should write it. That's way too many people to try to serve by yourself. You just can't do it.
Yeah, I've always wanted to write a book about my family history. I was going to make it a novel because you wouldn't believe the stories I could tell.
There is, I don't know whether it's one of those things where when you buy a new car, suddenly that same model of car is the only thing you can see on the street.
Yeah.
Or when you're pregnant, suddenly all you see is pregnant women.
Yeah.
It's called some attention bias, I think.
Oh, okay.
It might be attention bias, but I think there's a trend, and it may have to do with the fact that the baby boomers are retiring in droves.
Mm-hmm.
There's a trend toward getting your memoir or your autobiography written either in memoir form or in novel form if there's enough drama that it would create a great deal of problems in your family to publish it.
Most of these people are gone now, so it would be easy to write. Most of it's about grandparents, and at the time when you don't get divorced, and they did get divorced and hid the kids and all kinds of stuff. It's just
there and
drama.
it's interesting to people. If there is drama, it helps people if they have the same kind of drama, understand that they're not alone. I love memoir, and my first self-published book is a case in point of a self-created cover and a self-edited book. And I leave it the way it is for two reasons. One, to show that everybody has to start somewhere.
Yeah.
And the second, because it was a rather traumatic childhood experience for my daughter who had fibromyalgia before they had even named it.
Oh, okay.
And before she was an adult. She was 5 years old when she first started having symptoms, which is not the usual experience.
No.
Having her write her side of that story was rather traumatic for her. And now she's my editor. I don't want her to have to go back through that story again and edit it again.
Oh, yeah.
But it's one of the few books that I have published under my own name. And it's called Growing Pains because that's what we attributed all her pain to for years and years and years. Until we started attributing it to psychosomatic stuff before we ever learned that it was real. So it's one of the greatest regrets of my life. And yet one of the greatest prides of my life is that I raised a compassionate daughter despite the fact that she got no compassion as a teenager. So
yeah, that's one of those hidden pain. I had fibromyalgia for a while. I managed to cure it, but it's a nasty condition because when you look at someone, you know, there's no broken bones, there's
right.
no tumors and no surgeries,
It's an invisible illness like many others.
invisible, yeah,
And
and debilitating, very
very.
debilitating,
Mhm.
and really, really negatively it affects a person's life.
Exactly. Especially if they don't get family support.
Even with
And
family support, because they're not
yeah,
going to get it outside the family either. And when she was a teenager, you're outside the family now. Your
yeah.
peers and
Oh, yeah. I mean, the bullying and ribbing she
mhm.
endured and still came out one of the most compassionate people I know and one of the most generous.
Well,
I'm
that
very
might be
proud of
why.
her. And the reason I suggested we write the book is to help people understand what it's like and how they can help and what doesn't help. So, memoir of that sort is very, very helpful for people. So if you're in a profession, or if your mission in life is to help people, one of the best ways to do it is to write your story.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And that's why I say it's an act of courage. It not only requires you to find the time to get it done, but it requires you to be vulnerable. And that is not always the most comfortable thing you can do.
When I got my first bachelor's degree, one of the classes I took, we had to all go home and write our autobiography. We had a week to do it.
Were
When
you young?
yeah, this was kind of a while ago. When we came back to class and people started talking about what they wrote, there wasn't a dry eye in the room. Every person who had to write their autobiography had cried all week. It was so
Yeah.
painful to write all that stuff down.
Yeah, but it's cathartic. That's what the tears are about.
Mm-hmm.
Autobiography, coming back to a commercially viable book, autobiography doesn't do well unless the person is famous. And the
Mm-hmm.
reason is most of us lead rather ordinary lives with maybe a few uh, times or events that are high drama. And that's why memoir is coming into vogue again. May have been in vogue before, I don't know. But it's a book about the highlights or the lowlights, as the case may be, and how the author overcame the challenges, uh, how the how the highlights affected their lives. It's all useful, and everyone's story is important. I believe that.
Mm-hmm.
Not everyone's story will make them a lot of money, but it's important for everyone to write it. I believe that.
I agree. I agree totally. So, how can people learn more about the work you do?
Well, I'm glad you asked, because you and I met in a group where we are creating our own apps.
Mm-hmm.
And I love my app. It's not even a fraction of what it will be, but that's where people can learn more about my work. And eventually they'll be able to learn more about my fiction as well as my coaching side of my business. And that app can be found on the Google Play Store and on the iTunes App Store. I don't
The
know what
Apple
it's
App
called.
Store. It's the Apple App Store.
Apple App Store.
Yeah.
So you can search the word that is the name of my company, and I'll have to spell it out for you because it's a word I coined. And you can find it at https dot dot slash slash whatever that comes before Meta Prosperity. That's META prosperity, all one word, .app. If you go to that URL, you can download my app. You can register for even more content. And I hope you will, because there's a whole lot coming as I move my entire website over to that app.
Well, that sounds great. So that say that again. It was metaprosperity.app app.
That's correct. And
Okay.
Meta Prosperity is spelled META, and then the word prosperity, all jammed together as one word.
Cool. And then you have a VIP gift for our listeners. Is that correct? Tell us about that.
I do. Back to the courage aspect. It took a lot of courage for me to get over my imposter syndrome, which 90% of authors, I'm convinced, have, and put myself out there as an expert in anything. But there's an easier way to do it than I did it. And that is a 6-week video course called Courage, Risks, and Rewards. And that is actually available on my app. It's already there. You can look for it in the menu of my app under free course. So the VIPs are your listeners, and whoever happens upon either one of us, it's free through that app. It's a $197 value.
Very nice. Okay. So that sounds like a great gift.
Oh, and it comes with a workbook.
Oh, it comes with a workbook.
Yes. So each video talks about the workbook, and it also provides another resource specifically for authors or would-be authors.
So you just download the app and then you go to the courses and it's in there under courses.
Yes.
Very nice. Well, it's been great talking to you, Cheri. Thank you so much for sharing all your great wisdom.
Well, thank you for appreciating it. I told someone yesterday I intend to be a wise old white-haired woman. I still need to get this part white. God did this. Colossal joke. I've wanted silver hair for 20 years and I got streaks. Want to be a wise old woman sitting on a mountaintop.
That sounds good to me.
Pontificating. No, I really enjoy teaching what I know and providing any help I can to.
Well, I think that's good because I think anybody who is a coach or an entrepreneur or any kind of professional, whether you're like me, an acupuncturist or a chiropractor or naturopath, it helps if you have a book because then you're in more demand. What is your specialty? And the book is how you talk about that specialty.
Right.
So, yeah, I think that's very important.
If we've got 1 or 2 more minutes, Beverly, I want
Sure.
to touch on that a little more heavily.
Okay.
I mentioned imposter syndrome.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the ways it comes out is, but I'm not a world-renowned expert.
Mm-hmm.
But other famous people have written books about my specialty. And the thing is, they don't have your experience, not your precise experience. They haven't lived your life. They might do the same modality with a different twist. Your perspective is valuable. So don't let the fact that someone else has written a book about it stop you from writing your book, because it isn't going to be the same book.
That's great. Do you have any other closing words?
Oh, just do it.
Just do it. That's a good one. That is so true when it comes to writing. Just sit down and just do it.
Oh, I know it isn't that simple, and there are tools to make it easier.
Very good. Well, thank you so much for being with us today.
Thank you.
All righty.